Have you ever noticed how a lot of protests and protest movements start out really making a pretty good amount of sense? They've got a core group of people who understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. But oftentimes those kind of movements or events are victims of their own success because it becomes trendy or fun. And so a bunch of people who just really like rioting show up and start participating, but they don't get what's going on at all. That's usually when these things start to fall apart or just dissolve altogether. In Acts chapter 19, Paul is in Ephesus and he encounters a situation just like this. We're going to talk about it a whole bunch, but I was having a brainstorming session with Tina about how to introduce this in a way that was fun and clever. And somehow, disappointingly, at the end of that brainstorming session, what we came up with was that I should definitely do a super overly theatrical, serious, one-man a cappella cover of a protest song by Green Day. I'm not kidding. That's about to happen. I'm going to tell you in advance, this is not the best thing you have ever heard. But I think it's sort of useful for illustrating the point that I'm talking about in this episode. And if nothing else, I had fun. So here this is. Doom 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 doom. Hear the sound of the falling rain coming down like an Armageddon flame. Hey, shame, shame the ones who died without a name. Hear the dogs howling out of key to a hymn called Faith and Misery. Hey, bleed, bleed, the company lost the war today. I beg to dream and differ from the hollow lies. This is the dawning of the rest of our lives. On holiday. Your things, no. My things, yes. Your things, no. My things,
You've turned the whole thing into a joke.
Things, no. What are we doing? I suppose at any protest or riot, you're going to have a few people there who know what they're talking about, they have a clear objective, and a really legitimate gripe. I also suppose that at pretty much any riot or protest, you're going to have a bunch of people who are just there because it's riot day, and they love rioting. This is the way it's been for a long time, and it's certainly the way things are in Acts chapter 19, when there's a big protest/riot in the city of Ephesus. And just like any protest or riot, there are kind of three questions that any casual observer would ask when you see it happening. 1, wonder what they're griping about. 2, wonder if their gripe's legitimate. 3, wonder how much stuff they're going to wreck. We're going to ask exactly those three questions about this riot in Acts chapter 19. I wrote it down, 23 through 41. I am Matt Whitman. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour. Let's do this thing. In the first two verses of this little passage I just showed you, you've got a hint of where the rest of the narrative of the book of Acts is going. I'm not going to talk about it a bunch. Basically, Paul has travel plans in mind that include getting to Rome. Back to the riot. Demetrius is a silversmith, and he runs a guild of other silversmithers. And apparently, the thing that these silversmithers smither the most are these silver shrines to seashells on the... These silver shrines to Artemis, and they're a replica of the Temple of Artemis, which is one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. So in addition to these replicas of the Temple of Artemis, these silversmiths also made little replica idols of Artemis herself. So everybody wants one of these things. When you go to Ephesus, that's like the place that you go, and maybe you got a little place where you put your hands, or, a thing that you do where everybody poses for a picture. I don't know, but you want to take something home to your family. So these things sell like hotcakes, even to people who don't care at all about Artemis, the patron goddess of Ephesus. But for some people, these little shrines are the kind of thing that they'd put in their house and have a little offering for super fake little Artemis and stuff. And so there's a constant demand for these things. But this guy's got a business problem. Paul has come along, and the Jesus thing is making sense to a ton of people. And it's causing traffic to be reduced over at the Temple of Artemis, and it's big time causing sales to go down on this silversmithing trade. And he gives this speech about how Great Artemis is super important and we love her and she takes care of us. And what would this city be without her? We need to appeal to our patriotism. This is a matter of local pride that we would do something about this other god that people are talking about. Now what we're seeing here is an age-old play. It goes like this. I was doing really well in the free market, but then another idea came along that's defeating me in the free market. So I'm going to resort to violence to force my idea to win, even though right now the market is telling me that my idea is worse and the loser. If my idea is not working, maybe we can just cause enough of a problem that we can force the government to make my idea work. And maybe if people are telling me my idea isn't true, rather than arguing why it is true, we could just chant that it's true again and again until it becomes true. There is such a thing as smart and effective protest, but this is not it. Just chanting, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians," again and again and being violent is hashtag diplomacy at its finest. It's childish, it's Facebook-level debate, and it's not what principled people do when they try to affect change. So the whole city's in an uproar, and the crowd grabs Gaius and Aristarchus, a couple of Paul's buddies, and drag them into the theater with no doubt intentions to do horrible harm to them. Why did they pick those guys? Because it's a riot, and we're going to beat some people. You're totally allowed when it's a riot. So now Paul comes into the story for the first time. He sees his friends getting dragged by this mob into a theater. He's like, well, it's not their fault. This is my thing. I'm the one who started all this. So he wants to go rushing into the theater. And we know the guy can take a punch. His superpower is probably his brain. But if he has a secondary superpower, it's the same one that is Daredevil's secondary superpower, which is just keep getting punched and keep getting back up. But even people who didn't agree with or care about Paul restrained him and kept him from going in there because they knew what was going to happen if he did. So when Paul doesn't show up, the Jews push some guy named Alexander into the middle of the crowd for some reason. I guess this guy must have been super famous because we don't get an introduction or an explanation of who he is. And it looks like maybe he can get the crowd quieted down for a second, but then they figure out he's Jewish, and they go right back to the Great is Artemis of the Ephesians chant, rioting away for some desired outcome that still isn't clear. And in the midst of all of this insanity, Luke weighs in with a fun little editorial saying, most of the people who were there didn't even know why they were there. In other words, this isn't a principled gathering. This isn't a principled protest seeking meaningful change. It's just a straight up riot trying to strong arm people into making changes that these people can't accomplish on their own. In part 3, a smart city clerk runs into the theater and tries to break up this riot. Now, I say he's smart because he got a political reality that everybody else here was forgetting. Rome was really nice to Ephesus. I mean, yeah, sure, they owned them, but Ephesus was allowed to operate relatively freely, worship how you want, trade how you want, no problem. This is one of the big conditions were don't do that. No riots. Rome hates this kind of stuff. So the city clerk runs in and does the, hey, everybody. Wow. Great points. Yep. Artemis. Can we agree on the facts? She is awesome. Fell from heaven. Great point. All of you guys. Yes. And if you have further concerns, we have 3 hearings a week that you could show up for, and you could bring any civil suit you need to, and we will, using law and order, get that straightened out for you. But there's really no way to justify this, and the Romans are coming, so I'm going to need you all to stop, or we're going to have serious problems. Sanity returns, everybody leaves, and Paul, for once, gets to walk away without getting hit with any more rocks. So in answer to those 3 questions from the beginning, what was the protesters' gripe? Somebody's idea is beating our idea, and we don't want it to. Question 2, do they have a valid point? I would argue it's flimsy. Question 3, what's getting wrecked? Well, almost everything. Because of the way they handled their complaint, they just about destroyed the trade that they were protesting to try to protect. Some protesters smart, this just was not one of them. There's a subtle thing going on here that wouldn't have been so subtle to the original audience. Back in Acts chapter 16, Paul had a confrontation with a slave girl who channeled the spirit of Python. The spirit of Python was something that was under control of the Greek god Apollo. Apollo was the rock star dude god who everybody loved and was crazy popular at this time. The rock star female goddess who everybody loved and was crazy popular at this time was his twin sister, Artemis. Now, we have a second confrontation with the Apollo-Artemis family, and again, we see that Paul and the message about Jesus wins out, meaning that to the original audience, this Jesus thing is really catching on, and it's even starting to run roughshod over these most popular expressions of ancient Greek religion. Second thought, this friction makes sense. In fact, I think it would be weird if this passage weren't in the Bible. Here's what I mean. The author of Acts would have us believe that inarguably the greatest social change in the classical world is what we're reading about right here. The people who thought all kinds of different stuff all of a sudden are lining up to follow Jesus. If that was the case, we should expect serious turbulence. Now, I think if this were a man-made document, you would think to yourself, well, I want to impress people with how well everyone responded to convince them that they should respond as well. So I'm going to write a document that just talks about how smooth it went and how much everybody liked it. But there's a couple problems with that. One, it's not true. Two, it's not in keeping with human nature. People are vested in stuff, and if that gets challenged, it doesn't matter if it makes more sense or not. They're going to stick with what they're vested in most of the time. So this thing smacks of truth and reality to me, and in fact, if there weren't riots and violence recorded, I think that would be really suspicious. Final thought, I'm going to try not to be preachy, but it's going to sound a little preachy. I'll do my best. Here's the thing, I know we all have stuff we feel really passionate about. I know we all have things where we can't imagine there's another perspective and we're just absolutely sure we're right. Some of you watching have those opinions because of how you read the Bible. Some of you watching have those opinions because of a secular morality that you embrace as being absolute. I got my reasons too. The bottom line is this. As we age, we should be constantly reminded that we have the capacity to be wrong. And one of the most basic pushbacks on our pride in wanting to affect change is this. If my idea is so weak that it requires violence to make it happen, it might not be that good of an idea. I don't know how things are for people who don't live in the United States, but around here, I feel like we are losing our crap a little bit right now. And we are willing to go to places with other people to drive home our point or get the things we want that we weren't willing to go to before. I think we need to reconsider our approach with each other. Even if we win like that, it's not going to be sustainable. The other side is just going to come back with the same techniques. This can only end in bad ways. Violence doesn't make something that isn't true, true. It just makes the person who participates in violence violent and wrong. Grace and peace have to be the trademark of Christians, even if we think something is really wrong and even if we need to take dramatic steps to try to change it.